Welcome back to Riding Tandem and another episode here today. And we're talking today with a fun guest. I actually met Maisey Haines, is her name. I met her at the Iowa State Fair when I was there with my husband, Troy Burris, as vendors in one of their art buildings where my husband was selling his photography, and Maisey was there with her company that she started, founded, and she's actually the creator behind every product, handmade products that she creates out of leather, beautiful purses and bag tags and passport covers and wallets and just beautiful pieces. And so we met there, struck up conversation, got talking, and just hit it off. And so I was like, you absolutely need to come onto the podcast and talk about how you got your business started and what it looks like to actually have a business where you are literally hand creating beautiful high-end pieces that then you're also figuring out how to sell at the same time. Because those are very, I think, different sides of the same coin, right? Where you're the creator, you're the creative, and especially like when it's a tangible item, right? And I actually have, so for those of you who are catching this on YouTube, you'll actually be able to see this. So for those of you who don't know, the podcast is on YouTube now, so you can check it out if you like kind of the video component. And for those of you who are listening on a different platform and can't see, I'll describe what I'm holding up here. But if you're on the YouTube, you'll actually be able to see it. So I have one of Maisey's pieces, and it's a purse. It can be a backpack or a crossbody purse, and I love it. It has this beautiful. It's a nice, lovely, rich brown color. It's so soft, but the flap has a beautiful floral print, and it's actually a lambskin floral print with, it's kind of like a watercolor look. And one of the things I love about Maisey's business is how it is supporting sustainability. And she explains this more in our conversation, so I'll let her really lean in here. But I just think it's such a neat thing as we talk about businesses having good impact and ripple effect on the world. That also includes on our environment. And so she talks about how she sources these leathers. It might not be what you think, and so I'm excited for you to hear more about that. But that there's just such a sustainability piece to everything she does. And we also talk a lot in this episode about knowing who your people are, who your buyers are, and then really crafting your product, your business, your marketing, and how you approach them, and even how you create your products so that it really lines up and matches with what they are looking for. We talk a lot about, the market really decides, and some of the things that Maisey has discovered, I think, is going to surprise you. And so I'm excited to have you dive in with us and get to meet Maisey and just have a really great conversation, especially for those out there who are listening who you're a maker. This is going to be a really fun conversation. So let's go ahead and dive in. Well, welcome, Maisey Haines. This is really exciting, and I actually brought it with me for those who are like watching, since we now have the podcast on YouTube. So I want to show people what we're going to be talking about. Now, if you're listening, I'm going to describe it a bit for you as well, because Maisey is the founder and creator and mastermind behind Haines Cattle and Leather, which is based in Iowa. And she makes make beautiful purses and purse charms and just like fashionable leather wear. I guess you can explain more. But okay, so I'm going to grab it and I'm going to explain to those who are just listening.
I love it.
So I own one of your pieces. Yay! And this is a purse, and it is beautiful, soft brown leather. And then my favorite part of this is the top flap is, I forget, did you say is it lamb or?
It is lamb.
Lamb, right. Lamb. And it has a beautiful print on it that looks very watercolorish with beautiful colors. And I love it. This one's like a backpack, or I can do it as I can strap it on different ways, and I love it, love it, love it. So that's what we're talking about today, is just your business, Haines Cattle and Leather, and how you got here and how you have just created such beautiful pieces for people, which I think is really neat. So welcome.
Thank you.
I'd love to have you just start off with what's your background with this, right? I think there's so many questions for people about how do I get into actually making a product like this, whether it's sewing, working with leather, materials, etc., but just I don't know, I look around at stores and I go, who made that, And
Mhm.
you're the person.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we could talk about for hours because there's so many different ways you can go through it. For me, I grew up sewing. My mom actually went to school. She went to Iowa State for apparel merchandising and design. They didn't call it that then. It was like family consumer science or something. So she taught me how to sew. I sewed blankets. I sewed clothes. I designed one of my prom dresses. My mom was the one who actually sewed it. And then I went to school for apparel merchandising and design. And I focused mostly on the merchandising side of that. So, how to make things look beautiful or display them so it makes sense for those that are shopping. And that was a good intro to that. And I loved it. I loved studying, doing the whole fashion school thing, but I did it very quickly. So I graduated in 3 years instead of four, and I was young, and I was like, I'm going to get a management degree, a master's. So I did that, and I ended up going to work for a construction company in Des Moines, and it was the first time in my life. I mean, that's not really saying anything. I was 22, but I had a very structured schedule. I went to work Monday through Friday. I had set hours. Where in retail, you were all over the place. So even though you were working the same amount of hours as a corporate job, it felt more draining. So I
Mm-hmm.
just had all this time on my hands and I wanted to do something constructive with it. And I was like, I haven't sewn in a while. So I got my sewing machine because it had been at my parents' house and just kind of started sewing different things. And I didn't want to create clothes. I knew that from the beginning because it can be so personal and, it's so hard to get a fit just right. So which is fine. It just wasn't for me. And I randomly thought, it would be cool to do something out of leather. And I just bought a hide. As simple as that. I found one. And looking back now, I cringe at how much I spent on it. It wasn't good quality. But I got it and I cut it and I made some stuff out of it and learned a lot and just kind of it snowballed from there.
I love that. So you grew up sewing or like sewing as a kiddo?
Yeah. I think I got my first sewing machine when I was like 5.
Okay. 5,
Like
that's so young.
it was a little baby sewing machine. I mean, the thing was tiny and you had two speeds. It was the tortoise or the hare. You could go slow or fast. It was
Yes.
very basic. But yeah, I mean, I can't remember a time when I didn't know how to sew.
Hmm. Where do you think that came from? Like just the interest and especially at such a young age.
I have to give credit to my mom, my grandma, just everyone in my family knew how to sew. They made quilts. And, I think it was at some time my mom was probably just like, hey, do you want to learn how to sew? And I was like, sure. And I just started out hand sewing and then we moved to a machine and I made clothes for my dolls. I remember being like 5th grade, I wanted an American Girl doll for Christmas
Me too.
because
Absolutely.
yeah, well, I wanted to make clothes for her. Like she
Mm.
was my little model. So it just it's always been there. It was always something that was available to me and I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Like I really did the closest gas station was like 7 miles away and there was no town near us. So you kind of had to figure out how to fill the time and sewing was always there. It was a good way to fill the time and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna level with everyone. I do not enjoy sewing at all. But I can completely respect the fact that you do, like just the creative process there. My mom and grandma sewed. I think it disappoints my mom probably a bit that I don't sew just because she did teach us. Like we learned how to use a machine. But the real probably kicker is that my dad owned a sewing manufacturing company that he bought from my grandparents. So grew up around like industrial sewing and know how to do like use industrial sewing machines and
Yeah.
tackers and snap, like all the things. I had the big giant industrial sized spreaders and all of it. So maybe some of it just came from like just being so inundated with it.
Yeah.
But I definitely have an appreciation for starting with like cloth or fabric, or in this case, you know, a
Yes.
hide, and then just like creating a pattern and cutting and like seeing it come to life is really it's a neat thing to see.
Yes. And it's cool to look at different pieces, like different hides, different leathers, and kind of see how, because obviously you're going to get more than one bag or item out of a hide because these things
Mm-hmm.
are massive, and just all the different ways where it can all be the same thing, but it looks so different or it's appreciated in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the things I know you talk about with your brand is just how important like the durability and functionality are. But then you're also having to marry that with it being, you know, a stylish product. Like the purse that I have, I love it.
Hmm.
It just fits like stylistically. I really enjoy it. So how do you bring those things together? Like, what does your process look like now? I know you said the first time you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how the first ones go, but isn't that true of everything, right?
Yes.
But it's like, what's your process now to get to something both durable, functional, and stylish?
Yeah. So when I first started, I, again, didn't know what I was doing, and what I was making, I was just kind of throwing, what do you call it? I was just trying things out.
Yeah,
Like,
spaghetti at the
wait,
wall.
yes, that's what I'm looking for. I was
Yeah.
just like, this works. And, we learned a lot that things weren't holding up necessarily. So, a good
Mm-hmm.
example I use is I have card holders that I make. And when I first started making them, the interior pocket I glued down.
Mm-hmm.
And then so the outside, and it's meant to hold 2 or 3 cards per pocket, and there were 3 pockets on it. And I had someone be like, yeah, it broke. And I saw what they were doing. They had like 5 cards in there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And it's easy to say, well, yeah, you can't put that many cards in there. But at the same point, I could also look at it and say, can I make it more durable for you?
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of things, if we kind of come up with the idea, we'll find someone who we know is going to be tough on it to go try it out. Like, go see if you can break this, basically, is kind of
Right.
our theory. And we're going to have things that we're not going to catch everything. So, we did have some bags where the clasps were falling off. In that case, I said, I'm so sorry. People reached out to me. Yes, let me fix it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to, these pieces, for me, I like working with farmers and ranchers and those people who are really at the forefront of agriculture, who are raising cattle,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is the material we're using. So it's creating something that is stylish, is going to hold up at a price point they can afford. And it's a lot of trial and error, but also in the mind of what's actually going to work for them. It doesn't make sense to have, I don't know, just like it's kind of an idea of, okay, you need a wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would you actually want out of a wallet versus what do I want to sell?
Mm.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Sure. I mean, we talk a lot just about like how the market does decide things, right? Like
Yes.
you could be like, well, I think it should have 3 pockets, but if your clients are giving you feedback of I need 5,
Hmm.
then like the market decides, right? You can
Right.
you can keep trying to make it with 3 pockets, but people are saying I want 5, which if you want to be a viable
Yeah.
product.
Well, and
So
that's,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, kind of with that, you're the backpack that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a backpack and a crossbody.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the idea was it's leather, it's gonna last for a long time. How can you get the most use out of it in that time?
Yeah.
Versus just, well, I can wear this as a backpack, or I can just wear this as a crossbody. It's really kind of creating multifunctional products,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the ones that are going to be on that higher price point.
Yeah, and I love that about the bag that I have because I've worn it both ways,
Mhm.
and it doesn't feel cumbersome, to wear either way. And so there's like extra rings, that I use sometimes and not others, but it really does seem like it's made to be versatile and quick. Like it doesn't take forever to set it up, right? If I want to wear it in a
Right.
different way. And I was thinking about that with your audience or your, I guess, yeah, audience, your client
Mhm.
base. You were mentioning how you really have found that you like working with, ranchers, people who are in ag and that.
Mhm.
Do you find that they maybe have different needs than, let's say you're designing a bag for somebody who lives in New York City? Like are we talking about different needs here? Have you run into that?
Absolutely. I think, looking at men's wallets,
Mm-hmm.
so they're wanting something that they can put a checkbook in,
Oh,
you know,
interesting. Yeah.
wasn't even something I thought about. And I get asked at every show, do you have a checkbook holder?
And I feel like that is what a great example because I'm like a checkbook holder. Like I know where my checkbook is, but
Mhm. Well, but there are people who are still writing checks. It's
mm-hmm.
important to document those things, those
Mm-hmm.
purchases. So you kind of say, okay, I guess we're going to make that then.
Yeah.
Or, and our men's wallets, I made 5 or 6 of them and I gave them to my husband to test out before we actually put it on the market because I said, people who are going to wear these are need something that is really going to hold up over time. It can't be something that even in a year from now is going to break or pockets are going to fall off or something like that. So their needs are different. And I think functionality and durability is the highest priority, and the style comes almost last. Luckily, because it is leather and there's so many variations of it, it becomes easier to do. But with that in mind, like I won't make a men's wallet with a hair on hide because
Mm.
if they're wearing it in their back pocket, it's gonna wear off very quickly. And that's the nature of the game. But a purse, it's not gonna take that wear as easy.
Sure,
Or
not
it's
sliding in
gonna
my
wear
pocket.
easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, do you ever like test a product for a really long period of time? Or do you just like put it in a plastic bag and take a hammer to it to try and like, speed up the wear and tear process?
So I've done both. And some products, because of the structure and the nature of their design, they don't need a long test period. So we just did passport holders.
Mm-hmm.
Those didn't need a lot of thought gone
Yeah.
into, not thought, but durability, because we're using the same materials. So we don't need to test the materials. We're now just working on the style. Well, it does fit a passport. How hard are you really going to be on your passport? It's not something you carry every day with you. And we did, to add more to them, um, all of them come with a little notebook, and we have coloring books that can go in there and different
Oh,
stuff. So
fun.
if you want, but like the men's stuff, we test for 6 months at least
Yeah.
before it will go out. Um, Most of the time, it's longer than that, and because that is the stuff that's going to get used the hardest, and I really want to stand behind what I make.
Mm.
So I kind of have to put that in perspective of who's going to be using it and how hard are they going to be. And then I just kind of find someone who fits that and so here, go for it. Let me know
Yeah.
what you think.
So this makes me think about I bought a wallet for my husband, not one of yours, a completely different wallet, and it has a
Hmm.
neat design on it that I thought he'd really like, and he does. He really likes the design, and there's a message from me on the inside. Um, he loves the wallet, and he hates the wallet. Like he loves that it was the design and everything, but he sits on his wallet because he puts it in his back pocket,
Yep.
and it's like it's too much. It never really softened and molded and the
Yeah.
things which I don't think about because I don't
Hmm.
put my wallet in my back pocket.
Right.
So, it has been one of those things like I can totally see how important that is and the stuff you just don't think of. Like if you're not carrying that in your back pocket, And how true
Mhm.
that is for so many businesses that we talk to, where it's you have to validate your idea. You have to
Mhm.
validate your idea
Yep.
somehow. Yeah.
Well, and I think like we have a bag, we call it the dolly.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get the dolly as it is, or we have some with fringe on them. So, and those have a sheepskin lining, where they're very meticulously made. But someone who's going to wear a bag with fringe, are you you can kind of question, are you going to wear this every single day
Right.
and expect it to look flawless for 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're getting it out for special occasions, once a month when you're going out or something, yeah, it's going to hold up. So those kind of things go into the thought as well.
So do you
It
find yourself having those conversations with people when they're browsing and trying to pick something that they want? Like, do you help guide them? Have you found that to be part of your sales process?
yes, and I have again like something with the fringe. I'm like, I'll ask, are you planning on using this every day? No, it'll be my fun. Okay, then yeah, fringe might be good. Or and some people who do use it every day still might want that fringe. I think the thing I get the most is people who are like, oh, I want to get something for blank, what should I get them?
Mm-hmm.
Whether whoever it is, and guiding them in that direction of what can we do that's going to fit their needs, because I would rather someone come in and buy something they're going to use all the time than have a really big sale.
Right.
And I know that's kind of contradicting, but if you're going to buy a travel bag and because you're in college and you come home on the weekends and it's great to put all your makeup in, I would rather you come back next year and tell me that than the bag that you bought that sat in the bottom of your closet.
Absolutely. That totally makes sense for sure. What have you found have been some of your just challenges along the way with building the business? And I'm also curious, even to go further back, like what made you decide to even start a business with it versus just enjoying making some pieces for yourself or friends as gifts? Like what led to that, turning it into your business?
I don't know necessarily what made me go, you know what, I need to make this a business, other than I wanted to.
Hmm.
I don't know. I got a lot of compliments on the different stuff I was making, and I had people that would message me like, "Oh, is this for sale? Like, can I buy this?" And so I think it just kind of happened. I don't want to say naturally, but very in the first couple months I realized like this could be a little bit more than just sewing at home, and it's great cuz then it helps pay for all the materials.
Right.
um and then like challenges, it's going to be so cliche, and I think we're all going to say this, but COVID. I
Mm,
started my business November of 2019 was my very first show. My second show was March of 2020. Um, and I was supposed to do the state fair that year. I had all these shows lined up, and every single one was canceled.
right. Because your business is it heavily show and like live event based
Yeah,
or e-commerce and has that changed at all since then?
it's heavily like doing shows, is vendor shows, that kind of stuff is where it's at. We're in this transition period. We're trying to focus a little more on the e-commerce side. The challenge is everything is one of a kind,
Mm-hmm.
from a bag to a pair of earrings to a bracelet, like everything. I can't duplicate it necessarily. Um, so putting all of that inventory online, and then also finding a good way to keep track of it, when you're at a
Sure.
show and versus online. And so we're working on some new things there. I've really kind of made that a focus recently, but shows are definitely where I'm at, and I still love doing them. I love talking to people, and just you meet so many interesting people. It's really my favorite part of the business.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great point of that's how we met. We didn't
Yes.
even get to say at the beginning, like part of the way, actually not part of the way I know you, Macy, is through the Iowa State Fair. And
Yes.
my husband was a vendor in
Hmm.
the same building. And so I walked past your lovely creations day after day after day, and I had spotted this one, right? And I was like, I really like that one. And he did a great job too. It just disappeared one day, but I don't know how he got it out of there. And then it showed up for Christmas, and that was really cool. So
Yes.
that's how we met, and we had just such great conversations. Like, it is fun to be in those environments and to do the shows. As an introvert, it was a lot. And my husband and I actually have a whole episode where we talked about that exact event where you were as well, and just like what we learned and what went well
Hmm.
and what was hard for us. And as introverts, we're both like, oh my gosh, we were so just exhausted. But there is like a high from it too. Like there's so much interaction with people telling stories. It's, that's super fun in that regard. But are you an extroverted person?
I'm I'm more extroverted than people think,
Yeah.
but I'm a little more reserved.
Okay.
So I enjoy talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like COVID was rough for me because I didn't realize how much I liked being around people. But I don't know, maybe I'm a shy extrovert
Fair enough.
is how I would word it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I mean, if you're picking up energy off of people, it does. I don't know. I think people get misconceptions about, like, if you're introverted, that you don't like people, and I'm like, no, no, no.
Mhm.
I like people. You just exhaust me. So especially in
Yes.
large numbers, right? I don't feed energy. Versus other people I know who are like, where's the next party? Like they're just getting
Hmm.
revved up. My battery
Yeah.
is draining. So that makes total sense. So, like with shows, what are some of your top learnings from doing shows, doing live events? I know you've done Iowa State Fair, and we were talking a little bit before we hopped on here, like Iowa State Fair, Kansas City Fashion Week, American Royal, a number of
Yeah.
larger events and shows. Are you picking and choosing strategically for people out there thinking about this as well? Like, what do we need to know?
I think you just have to try things, but you do have to be strategic about it. I did like small craft shows don't do well for me, and that's just because my price point is higher than most people's there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even some of the like arts and craft shows, I thought that would be great. Everyone else here is making everything too. People are going to understand, and they still don't necessarily get it
Okay.
that what we're doing is we're making everything. There's also shows I've done where it's more direct marketing type of stuff, and I don't do well at those.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found is I have to be in front of the agriculture audience. So it is the state fair, American Royal, rodeos, horse shows, cattle shows. Those are the things that they need to see. And then just probably the biggest lesson, this is kind of going off that, but when doing them, I worked retail and you dressed up and you did this, and I thought that's what I
Mm-hmm.
got to do. And what I found was when I pulled back a little bit and kind of was a little more like your best friend, not so over the top,
Mm.
and just t-shirt and jeans, like we're hanging out, we're having fun. I became more approachable, and then people shopped more.
I can totally see that. I mean, you're matching the vibe of your people, right? And
Yes.
your products too. Like I could see it being out of line of the items you have, they're beautiful. They are
Hmm.
stylish, they are fun, but like you said, they're very functional as well.
Yep.
So, and I was talking about this in a recent episode actually with Josh Kelson, and just how you can sometimes like think that you have to be a certain way, right? That
Hmm.
business people look like this or have a background of, and that's not necessarily true, like at all.
Right.
And I even think back to like first starting our businesses early on. Like I cut my hair, I wore certain clothes like that were not even me trying to
Mm-hmm.
project this image of, especially because I have a young looking face, or at least I did at the time. And I was worried people wouldn't take me seriously, all the things like just
Yeah.
paranoid and worried about. And so I really changed even my appearance to try and like
Mm-hmm.
fit a mold. That didn't go well. Like maybe I fooled some people, but like I was not fooling myself, and
Right. And that's what I found, it I would rather, it's easier to approach someone when you can find something to say to them. So, like, if I have a shirt that I'll wear that says "Tell your dog I said hi."
that's
It's
fun.
it's from a animal shelter, and everyone comments on it. And that's an easy barrier to break because what I've found is most people will make a comment on it. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I have a Australian Shepherd. His name is Opie, and we'll
Hmm.
talk. And they're like, so I had a question on this product.
Hmm.
That's what they used as their opener. So it's giving those nonverbal cues of you can talk to me. I want to talk to you as well.
Yes. Yeah. We tried something actually at the state fair where we wore t-shirts a couple of days that said, tell me about your farm. And so it was kind of similar, like a
Yeah.
conversation prompt. And a couple people would pick up on that. And they're like, well, what do you
Mhm.
mean? Like, do you guys have a farm? So it just would start up a conversation. So I can totally see that, like
Yeah.
using your style and your clothing to get conversations started. Okay, I've got to know, what are some of the stories from being at shows that you are just the most memorable for you? Like good, bad, funny, ugly, horrible. What are the ones
Um,
that stick out and you're like, okay, if you
okay,
only
so
knew.
I have three of them,
Oh
and they
boy.
all happened at the state fair.
Okay, great.
So my first one was my first year, and this is one that still like it doesn't gut me anymore, but it was hard. I
Mm,
had a lot of people pick stuff up, and I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I had quite a few people pick stuff up and be like, "Well, I could make that for less."
ooh, ouch.
And it was my first show, first really big show, and it was
Hmm.
very hard to process that. Um, since then, I take a different approach, and I'm like, I love that for you. Go do it. Like, instead of trying to defend myself of being like, no, you couldn't, I'm just like, go for it. If you want to. And I don't mean that, I kind of mean it sarcastically, but I have had people approach me being like, I want to get into leather.
Mm,
What tips do you have? And I'm like,
mm.
here's what I can tell you. Um, and I still remember this. She was an elderly lady, and I think she quilted. So she thought everything I made was way overpriced and
Mhm.
all of this. Um, I had a guy show up and was like shopping with his wife. He was drunk
Oh no.
and he spilled beer all over the place.
Oh dear.
It got on like three things, but he bought all of them.
Oh
He was buying
wow.
them anyways, and then it was just on the floor. So it wasn't a disaster, but it teaches you a lot of patience.
Hmm.
And then I had another girl, she comes and sees me every year, and she'll just pick up a couple things, and this happens every year. She'll pick up a couple things, then she'll leave, and she won't even get out the building. And she's back, and she's like, you know what? I want to get this and this and this too.
Oh yeah. She's got to
So
think about it.
yeah, you kind of turn these. I mean, they're friends at that point. Like I look forward to seeing them when they
Hmm.
stop by, or they'll bring their friends by, and it's it's fun. I From a product standpoint or like selling standpoint, those are the most memorable.
Yeah.
I did have. Oh, I wasn't even there for this. Okay, this one's crazy. So I had left my booth and my dad was watching it. I think I went to the bathroom or something. And I had a bag and it was marked, what it was, price, and then material. And so it said leather, and it was a baby leopard print because it was a cowhide, but you can get them printed with different animal prints, florals, all of these different things on them. Like what you just showed, yours was a lamb with that print.
Yeah.
And a lady started arguing, thinking that it was actually a baby leopard
Ah, sure.
hide that we were using.
Which was like, I'd be upset if I was thinking about a baby leopard. You know what I mean?
Right,
Yes.
yeah. And so, and Dad didn't know what to do. He's just like, no, it's cow, and, where I would have kind of explained, I can see where the mix up is. So actually, we use food first leather, is what they call it. So, for the most part, everything we use is a byproduct of the meat industry. So, cattle, sheep, goat, deer, pig, it's all being used for meat. And then we're just taking the hides and using them in another way to create less waste and be a little more sustainable.
Yeah, I think that brings up like a sensitive subject, right? That has to come up in your line of work of using animal product. And I know you've talked about that a little bit, and I've overheard you even talking about like how that actually is a passion of yours, is that it is helping reduce waste, that you're not going out sourcing exotic animal furs,
Mm-hmm.
and illegally sourced, polar bears, etc.
Right.
Um, but that does seem like you're in a sensitive industry to some degree. On the flip side, because of the audience and the following you have, like they are all kind of immersed and maybe understand just how that all works, and the fact that you're helping reduce waste
Mm-hmm.
and really honoring and using the whole animal in that case, I think is a way that some people may see it as well.
Yeah. And luckily, I mean, I am based in Iowa. It's people kind of know what's going on with they're very connected to the food chain and that process
Mm-hmm.
versus being in a large metropolitan area where you might be a little more removed. So I haven't had any crazy stories that I can think of off the top of my head. I've had a few people that are like, ooh, I don't do that. And I'm like, that's fine, it's not for everyone. But yeah, I mean, we raise cattle as well. I mean, the name of the business is Haines Cattle and Leather. And just again trying to use everything as much as we can. I think that's really cool to be able to do. And I don't want to go on a tangent, but I do kind of take an issue when we talk about using a vegan leather because it's plastic at the end of the day that isn't going to hold up the same way and is going to end up in our landfills. So I get when it comes to using, again, those exotic animals, not wanting to use their fur. And California actually made it illegal to
Mm.
sell furs in the state. And I think New York is working on it too. And I can kind of understand some of that. I do still have it is good to trap some animals and work on the conservation aspect of it. But if we can continue to use these hides as much as possible, I mean, for me, even if I make something and it doesn't work, okay, yeah, maybe I can't use an inch around the whole thing because it's got seams in it, but can I make something else out of it? Or just trying to use as much as we can. I've actually, when I started testing products out, I would go buy leather jackets from secondhand stores and cut them up because it was a cheap way to get material to test stuff
Sure.
on.
I love that, just the reuse, right? Being able
Yes.
to reuse, and there's a sustainability piece that I think people do really care about. And to your point, like what is filling our landfills, and there's so many things about that right now, like with fast fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we setting our world up for when we're leaning into fast fashion versus leaning into pieces that are more sustainable, maybe that we hold on to for a much longer period of
Right.
time. We've invested in,
Hmm.
And just as it does return back into a landfill, if that's the case at some point, like, can it even fall apart? Like, is that even a
Right.
possibility? Um, so I think that those are some important things. And I love how you take time to educate people.
Hmm.
I think that's just really important in any business. Like, when we could take the time to educate people and not take offense, right? And it's so easy, gosh, to take offense, especially when you're pouring your heart and soul into something. So I just commend you for leaning into helping educate people understand.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
think too, I've learned so much over versus when I started. So I have, you know, 5 years of diving into the research of what it is. And I always say if I had the time and money, I would get a PhD in textile science and really break down the different leathers as we're trying to create, uh, I read an article about using cactus to create leather.
oh, interesting.
And it is. And I'm curious as to what that feels like compared and how it does break down. I do have a worry though, cactus take a long time to grow.
Yes.
So is that a smart move? I don't know. But I think we're handed this product that we're still going to continue to eat meat. Let's use it. Like, no one's, as someone who farms and who has cattle, we would never sell cows for the price of a hide. Like, it is 100% a byproduct. No one is raising cattle, sheep, goats, pigs for their hides. They're raising them for the meat.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, mostly meat, and that's the byproduct.
So I know you've mentioned this, just thinking about like costs of things, like that there can be some nerve-wracking moments when you are working on pieces because though it is a byproduct, there's still an expense to it. And I think I saw in one of your posts not too long ago, you're like, I was kind of nervous about, like,
Yeah.
is this going to work out? So just talk us through that a little bit. It's a different business model when you're putting a fair amount of expense up front. Is that correct? Like into just the materials, and then there's the time and labor. Like, this is a pretty time intense as well as like actual cash expenses that you're having to put into it. How do you sustain that model in your business? Is the sale of cattle helping cash flow you? Like, what does that look like?
So it is an interesting thing with leather. You're buying it by the, you can do it a couple different ways. I buy almost everything by the hide. So a
Mm,
full hide or half hide. There are places if you're just going to do a little tinkering, just doing a little jewelry, that you can buy it by the square foot, but it is a lot more expensive.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I usually buy it by half hide, full hides, and it is very nerve wracking because I know if I cut this and cut it wrong, I can't fix it. And it was
Mm,
very expensive. If I go to sew it and sew it wrong, unlike traditional fabric where you can rip it out and sew it again, you're punching a hole in the leather. You can't come back from that. So, a lot of it, we will then, if mistakes happen, we can break it down and make smaller items out of it. It's not the end of the world. And that's why we started making the card holders. We make bookmarks, we make earrings, because we had all of these scraps and we're like, this is still good stuff. What
mm-hmm.
can we do with it? So that's kind of, it is, you have to get a little creative to figure out how to use as much as you can when, and it does help sales. Those little things that are $5, $10, it's easy to buy.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, it is a difficult thing to get into if you want to, because at the end of the day, like, my tax forms are, we are a leather manufacturing business. That is how we are set up. Where people think we're more of a retail, which that is the biggest component of it, but it is a manufacturing business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate to have a good job when I started to help pay for it and continue to just kind of grow it and invest back into the business.
Now, are you, you have to remind me again, I'm so sorry, you may have stated this earlier, but is this your primary now, or are you still doing some work in another job too?
I do have another job. So I spent about a year just doing the business,
Mm-hmm.
just growing it, getting it to a place. This is the extrovert. I like human interaction. I don't like a ton of it,
Yeah.
but I like to have my people to be around. And when I was just doing the business full time, I would have, maybe a show a month. And when you go a week without seeing anyone, I'd see my husband,
Mm-hmm.
but that's it. It gets really lonely. So I did go back to work just so I could be around people, more of a mental health thing.
Yeah.
And I love what I do for both jobs. And I have bosses who are flexible so I can take time off. So very fortunate in that fact. But
I love that. And I think that's an important thing for people to think about too. I know a lot of folks who listen to this are they are business owners, but some of them are not. They are thinking about it, or they do have like a side, kind of a side thing or side hustle, or not even a side thing. Like sometimes I think the other job like can be the side, almost.
yes.
Whether it's from an
Yep.
income standpoint or just mental standpoint of, hey, I just need this as an outlet. What a great point! Like being in business, depending on what the business you're doing, it can be isolating. I
Hmm.
can imagine people probably think that you just like sit around and, drink coffee and come draw sketch cute designs, and then you tinker in your shop and you're like sewing this and sewing that. And it's just like a charmed life, right? But I can totally see
Hmm.
that it would be lonely. And my hunch is there's a lot more to it than that, too. I mean, like you were saying earlier about, gosh, how do we figure out inventory? And how much of your time do you feel like you spend really designing sewing, and how much of the time is like applying for shows and setting up and doing the billing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and to go back a little bit on your point of like the charmed life. So my mom and dad went to Texas and my mom helps me out so much. Like my mom does a lot of the sewing and she helps design. She is very much a critical part of the business. And I said, okay, you know where my suppliers are in Texas. Here's a budget. Here are a few things that I really want. Go buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, oh, I was talking to some people about it, and they're like, oh, your mom's so lucky. She gets to do that and just get to go pick out whatever she wants and this
Yeah.
and that.
Shopping spree.
Yeah, exactly. And mom came back and she's like, that was stressful.
Mm.
And I was like, you didn't have to. And she's like, no, I enjoyed it, but it is this fact of it's not just like, oh, I like this, it's pretty. It's what's going to sell. What can I make out of this?
Mm-hmm.
Are other people going to like it? You have 50 million questions going through your mind at once, and you're trying to make a decision with not really knowing what's going to work. And I mean, you kind of do, but
How do you kind of, right? The kind of you kind of do. How are you evaluating the market from even just like a style? Like I'm just thinking like colors and patterns, because you can get things like my purse has the floral pattern. How do you, like, what are you watching? What are you looking at? What are you basing some of your educated guesses on?
I took everything I learned in college from trend forecasting, um, how to watch the markets, fashion shows. I took all of that information and I threw it out the window because it did not apply at all
Mm,
to what I was doing.
interesting.
Um, it, the idea is that you should be, the hot trend, the hot color for fall was red. Love that. But again, my customers are not going to spend that money on a red bag that's going to be a trend piece.
Ah, yes. Did you try some of that? Like, did you figure that out by trial and error, or did you just know that right
Yes.
off the bat?
I figured it out by trial and error. They want the traditional leather look.
Mm-hmm.
We'll throw in different pops of something different and something fun, and those usually go more towards our kind of college age high school girls that want a floral or a like some of the leather I have will be an Aztec print, and then it'll have like a gold sheen over it. So it was trial and error, but once I figured out who's really shopping and who's coming back, because that's a key point too. There's a lot of people that will say, oh, well, once you get this, I'll buy from you. But it's more just their way of being okay with that not buying. Them justifying it in their head like, well, I'm going to tell her this so I don't have to feel bad.
Sure.
So they don't have to feel bad. But yeah, it was kind of just figuring out this is what they like. And once I got that figured out, it was a little easier. Floral patterns people like. The traditional brown leathers are always popular. People like cheetah, but they're not a big fan of the crocodile print.
Interesting.
Nothing over the top girly, so nothing like hot pinks or like Barbie core was a big thing. Everyone was wearing Barbie. My people, that's not what they wanted to buy. And if they did, it was a small thing. So it was, again, like your card holder or a wristlet or just those small items.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Like there's a timelessness about the
Mm-hmm.
products you're creating of it's meant to stay with you for a while and
Mm-hmm.
not just be a trend piece. So that makes a lot of sense. And I love how you've kind of walked through figuring that out. So often for creatives, I think there is that push and pull of, okay, so there's the things that I like personally, there's the things I think the market likes, and there's the things that like, what do my people like? And
Mm-hmm.
where's the overlap, right? Is there an
Yes.
overlap when you bring that kind of diagram together, figuring that
Well,
out?
and one thing that I've started doing too is I'll take pictures and I'll post them on Instagram. And I'll just say, you be the buyer. And I'll post, a bunch of different stories that you just vote on which one you like.
Yes.
And I'll do that with designs too. So the passport, I was like, do we want it to have a boarding pass pocket or not?
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, yes, that's what we want. I'm like, okay, that's how I'll design it. I was trying to figure out what color fringe to put on a bag. So I'll throw it on my Instagram story and kind of let the people decide. But going back to the leather, there's some things that I've put on there and I'm like, there's no way people are going to like this.
Yeah.
And they do, and I buy it and it sells like crazy. So again, putting it back in their hands, letting them decide this is what we want. This is, and for the most part, those people who are taking the time to vote are the same people who are going to spend their money.
So I know we talked at the fair a lot about social media. And so I love that you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing this up. I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And I know we had talked a bit like that social media, you certainly used it, but you felt like it wasn't like your thing. And I loved how you were talking about how you have created a calendar and it gives you a little
Mm-hmm.
more freedom in what to post. What are you finding from like a marketing perspective, whether it's social media, otherwise? How do you market when your market is at these live shows? Are you using your social media mostly for like product validation, which I love? I hope people are like listening to that because that's huge. And I've done that as well, kind of a this or that. Like you could get so
Mm-hmm.
much there. But when you're marketing and you're selling mostly at live events, how are you using your social platforms? How are you using your website to help with that? Like, how are you tying the two together? I guess what I'm trying to ask here. I felt a little over the place with that question. How are you doing your
Well,
marketing when you sell at live shows? What does that look like?
well, so I found that social media was so overwhelming. I'd listen to podcasts and books, and they're like, "It's so easy, just post once a day." And I'm like, "But what do I post?"
Totally.
And what I ended up doing, this is my life hack that probably only works for me. I said, okay, where do I want to be posting? So Instagram/Facebook, because they tie together. Their post, a story, and then TikTok. Those are the three things I focus on, and that's it. and I probably focus a little more on TikTok than
Mm-hmm.
anything. And I took an Excel sheet and I numbered it 1 through 31 because the most days we'll ever have in a month is 31.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just said, okay, so on this day I would talk about this. And then this day I'd talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do that. And, then I could switch things up. So on the first on TikTok, I might talk a little bit about the farm, but then on the third Facebook, I'm posting about it. So I created that. So whenever I'm like, "Ugh, I don't know what to post, I just click on that and I'm like, oh, today I can post about XYZ. And it made it less daunting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it made it easier because I have the pictures and I have the content. I just, getting it there was the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm using social media more to say, sometimes it is to be like, look at this product, doesn't it look cool? But also, this is the process that goes into it because I've found people are so interested in the actually sewing something
Yes.
or cutting it out. So, and that's kind of why I lean a little more towards TikTok because I can do those videos and kind of cut them up and make it compact and nice, and you can just kind of watch how something comes together. Or I'll do a video on why we created a product, or just cool fun facts about it, and it just is a little more off the cuff and fun, and I can just be like, okay, quickly I want to talk about XYZ and then go through it and post it up. I struggle with captions, and I think we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
The captions, the hashtags. So and I still struggle with it, but I kind of just decided I'm just going to do what I do. And if it doesn't work, I don't care,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to come from a perfectionist standpoint, and now I come from a done is better than perfect.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like it. And I love that you're leaning into that behind the scenes look because I know when we are there chatting together, I'm like, everybody's fascinated with how this beautiful item came together. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, the item in itself is really cool, but if you really want to stop people for them to get to see the pieces and the cutting and the sewing and
Yeah.
all of that. So I think that's great. And what a good perspective too, especially for those out there who are creators. I think we
Mm-hmm.
can get really focused on, well, who's going to care about, here I am looking at bolts of cloth or,
Mm-hmm.
flipping through hides or like, no, we're
Yep.
totally interested because that's not our everyday.
Yeah.
We don't know. And I enjoy watercolors just as a fun on the
Mm-hmm.
side. And yeah, people all the time they're like, I just like to watch the brush stroke, and I'm like, oh, okay. You don't think of it that way at first because it's just so second nature for you.
Well, and I have a lot of people that ask about my sewing machine.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I'm like, because it is an
You're like, it's
industrial
a tool.
sewing
What do
machine.
you mean?
Yeah. And it's made for leather, but I'm like, it's very basic. Like, I can stitch forward, I can stitch backwards, I can adjust the stitch length, and that's about it.
Hmm.
So to me, I'm like, it's such a basic machine, but to some people, like, that's so cool because they've only ever been around a, like, home sewing machine. So, like, those are the things that you don't think about because I'm like, I've used it every day. Like,
Hmm.
it's just a sewing machine. Or, yeah, it's all it's so second nature to me that I don't always think about the cool factor of it.
Hmm. Oh, it's very cool. Not many people craft, beautiful handbags out of leather. There's very
Yeah.
few. And so, yeah, it's such a neat thing and such a fascinating. Like I said, there's so like start of this. There's so many times that I just see something. I'm like, how did this arrive in the world? It's such
Hmm.
a cool offering. How have you made sure that people can identify your products from someone else's? Or have you figured that out? Like, are you sewing a tag in? Are you like, can people spot it?
So I I can always spot it. Like
How
if you
fun
send
is
me a
that?
I know my designs, I know what I've made.
Hmm.
So it is cool. It's so cool to see it in the wild too. Like to be somewhere and be like, oh my God, I made that. You're wearing what I made. Like that was, I had that happen recently. I had it happen last year. Someone went up to my mom and they're like, I saw one of Macy's bags.
Hmm.
And my mom's like, really? And they're like, yeah, just walking around town. And then I was at a show and this girl had one and I was like, did you buy that from me? And she goes, yeah, I got it like last year or whatever. And I'm like, that is so cool that she's, utilizing it and using it. But to get back to your question, we have started adding tags. So they're a little leather tag that we'll put in the bags. And then I also have branding irons. So they're, circle or
Hmm.
inch, 2 inches. So some of the bigger things I can brand. So they'll have our Haines cattle and leather on them forever.
That's awesome. Very
Yeah.
cool. But to be clear, you were making products without for a while.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
A year ago, I wasn't even
Hmm.
tagging anything. Like all it had would be a hang tag that had our business name on it with our price and stuff.
Yeah. Isn't it funny the things that you sometimes are like, you just don't think about? And then you're like, well,
Hmm.
hold up. Like, how are people going to know to find me again? Or what if they gift this? And I just think it's
Yeah.
fun how much we can grow as businesses and the things that we look back on years later and we're like, why did we have tags? Or why didn't we think of this? I'm actually
Yeah.
having some cards printed, so I have to chuckle a little bit about this. Some watercolor cards printed. It didn't occur to me till the very last minute that I should probably have like a logo or contact information on it,
Yeah.
but it's by having conversations with people like you who's like, we've decided we're going to do this now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Of
Hmm.
course.
Well, and sometimes I think it just takes time to figure out how you're going to execute it
Hmm.
to make it look nice. Because some of the bags I was making, I didn't really have a good seam to attach your standard like hang tag, that's like in your shirt and stuff
Right.
to put that on. And you have to order so many of them. It's
Absolutely.
so expensive. So just figuring out that process that works for you can be overwhelming
Hmm.
sometimes. And it's I I like being able to like hear stories like this of someone else being like, yeah, I just got a leather tag printed and I used a company that makes all the tags and everything. So I don't do any of that except for the ones that are branded. But even then, I had a branding iron. My mother-in-law got it for me. So it's it seems really simple, but sometimes that like to actually get there and make that connection isn't as easy as we think it is.
I love that you bring that up because just thinking about even my husband with what he's doing and then me now putting these cards together, there are so many pieces, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
what I love about this conversation is one, you just started doing it anyway. You're like, I am still selling my products. We'll figure out the tag thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, so I think that's awesome because there are so many little things when you're selling products like, am I going to put it into a plastic, is it going to go into a plastic sleeve? How am I going to affix it? Does it need a little card in the back? Am I going to put a sticker on it? Am I going to have a SKU? Like all of these little things. What bag am I going to give? I mean, obviously you're making bags, but the bag inside the bag, like what's the
Right. Yep.
shopping, what's the packaging, and the delivery, method and all that. And it can start to feel daunting, like all these little things add up. On top of keeping in mind that the cost of the 2 cents for the poly bag, the 13 cents for this, it just adds up, and sometimes more than a couple cents. It can be quite a bit more, depending on what it is. So,
And yeah, and I think too that goes to who are you selling to? You know, what do they really care about? Because I've got packages, and I'm sure we've all seen videos of people unboxing something and being like, oh my God, it's so nice. They wrapped it in this fancy tissue paper. But then you need to ask, is that what your customers actually want? Who's buying from you? Do they care about that? And if the answer is yes, then go for it. You need to do that. My answer was no. Of course, they want it to arrive safely and those kinds of things, but their concern is more with the product, not the packaging that it comes in. They're going to get their appreciation as they use it and get to put it to use versus opening the box.
Yes.
So kind of figuring that out. And, I'm sure there's people who have opened something of mine and been like, oh, I wish, it would have came in a pink box with her logo all over it or something. But of course you're going to have outliers. So it's figuring out what is the majority.
Yeah. I can totally see that. And I keep envisioning like how your products just patina so lovely over time. Like that's part of the value and the charm with them.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what would be
Yeah.
really cool is to follow a bag for a couple of years and just show the like, here's where it started, here's where it's at now, and just how beautiful it still is. You know what I mean? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many great stories with that for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I'm trying to get more people to share pictures of their bags on like Facebook and Instagram and tag us because I want to see it. Like I put so much time and work into it. Everything that someone has bought from me, I guarantee I have a story about it.
Yeah.
Like it's not something that I just scrolled through my computer and said, "Oh, that looks pretty. We'll buy it." Like there was a lot of thought that went into it. And it would be cool for someone to be like, "Oh, I purchased this." And I can be like, "Oh my gosh, I remember picking out that hide and I went to buy it and they actually told me they had sold it to someone else and didn't pull it off the shelf. And so I didn't get it." And this is a true story. And then I was leaving Texas, like I was getting on the flight and they called me and they're like, "Hey, this is actually still available. They decided they didn't want it.
Oh, wow.
Do you want this hide?" And I'm like scrambling to figure out how am I going to get this hide while not missing my flight. And, so there's so much that goes into it that it's really personal to me.
Yeah, so we could talk about this for a long time, but I have to know, just thinking about this from like, you really do spend a lot of time picking the hide, right? Like to get a phone call and to go, okay, yes, I'm going to scramble around for this because I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think a lot of people just go, well, a hide's a hide. A brown cow's a brown cow. A black cow's a black cow. Like, what are we talking about here, Maisey? Like, when you're picking products out, what are you looking for? What is kind of your criteria?
So imagine.
And I just insulted you with brown cow, black cow, black cow.
No,
Like,
you're fine. No,
I know
no,
there's more, but I don't.
so imagine you're in your garage. Think of how big like a 2-car garage is.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine 8 or 9 of those all put together. And now just different rooms. I think there were like 6 rooms, just floor to ceiling hides hanging off of them. And so they would clip them at the top and then they're placed about 4 inches apart.
Like
and hide
looking
just
at rugs, kind of?
similar,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
All around the room and then all throughout the middle. And so each room is a different thing. So like the first room is all hair-on hides.
Okay.
And then hair-on hides are categorized as a Brazilian, Colombian, and tricolored or a solid. So I kind of know tricoloreds do really well, and that's what I lean towards, or anything with a brand on it. So if it's branded, if the cow is branded, that's going to sell well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of hair-on hides. And then you'd move on to like all of your embossed hides. So that's anything that's got like the Aztec print I was talking about, or whatever, like a floral print. And just, I kind of pick those are my accents. So how do I want to add a little fun, a little pop to maybe what I already have? And then you've got various rooms of solid colors, and those are more, I know browns and blacks, I need tons of those. And then I'll add some fun colors in there of like a red or a pink even, or just some of those different things.
That's so fascinating. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Just 'cause it's curious, right? When you're not, like I said, when you're
Yes.
not in that industry, it's like, wow, what does this really look like? Um,
Yeah. And so I'll just walk around, and I have um, Emily, who is like my person,
yeah.
that she'll send me pictures. So I don't always have to go down there and buy it.
hmm
And she'll be like, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, "Ooh, I really like that. I need it."
hmm
But we'll just walk around, and I'll be like, I'll pick it up and I'll look at it and decide, yes, this will work, or no, it won't, or, and that's really what it is. And it sounds really fun. I went down one year with my dad. We spent less than an hour there. So imagine this. We drive down to Texas, 12-hour drive. We're there less than an hour, and we're on the way
Oh,
home.
wow.
And the car was completely full
Mm.
of hides. But it was one of those things that you kind of get a feel for it. And I, went down there with a game plan of, I knew I needed a lot of my solid colors, so
hmm
those are easy to pick. Um, and then it was just adding in some of those fun ones.
So, do you envision in the future, because you raise cattle as well, do you ever use your own cattle's hides? And would you ever like to be like your own supplier?
So we have not. I don't know.
hmm Fair enough.
And that's the honest answer to it. I think there is a misconception that we use our own
hmm
hides, and we don't, honestly. It is a very large process to get it tanned, and I couldn't even do any of the embossing.
hmm
I could just do hair-ons. Um, and it's a very different process when you're having someone do it, like a
hmm
taxidermist, because that's mostly what's around here, versus getting it done versus a commercial grade
Sure.
tanning facility.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, you're talking like pretty large scale at that point where you want to
Hmm.
be, your
Yep.
own supplier in that. But yeah, I was just curious about it. Okay, well, we should probably head into some of my rapid fire questions before I end up on some tangent about, well, where do the zippers and you know what I mean? Like, just so
Yes.
curious, like, spill all of your secrets.
We'll
Um,
save that for next
Save
time.
that for next time, yes. The one thing I do want to just ask about is what have you found beneficial? Because you do have to build partnerships and relationships. Like you just mentioned, the woman who kind of knows you and sends
Mhm.
any advice for people who are also looking to build those vendor relationships when they are in a fabricating type of situation? Anything you found works well? Anything where you're like, learn from that?
I think in any situation, you never know what someone else knows.
Mm,
So I have no idea, for example, me being here talking to you, I did not know what you did when we first started talking.
yeah.
I did not know it was going to land us here, but I just had a conversation with you, and this is where we are. So I think with everyone, you can't pigeonhole someone to be like, they only know about this, because even if that's true, you don't know who they know. So just creating conversations with people over anything, because you don't know where it's going to lead. And I think that's really the key, having the conversations, and following up with people, thanking them when someone helps you out, um, sending that message of, down one of my suppliers in Texas who I work with, I sent her a message, hey, my mom's going to be down there, can you help her out? And she did, and mom said, yeah, she helped me, like, it was so much fun. So then I sent her a follow-up. It was just a text that said, hey, thanks for taking the time. Mom really enjoyed it. I love the pieces that we went with. I appreciate what you did. You know, that that always helps build a relationship, and it didn't take me very long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's wishing, some of my customers that buy from me, I'll wish them a happy birthday because I have that saved in my phone now.
Fun.
Just it just being a person to them and treating them like another person is it, and it's just going to grow naturally.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. So we've talked about this a little bit, but if you were to summarize, what would you say is the biggest misconception about owning a business?
There is so much admin. It is that is my number one thing,
Mm,
because I think, again, we've talked about, people think it's a charmed life of sitting there, just you wake up, you stretch, you do a little sewing, you sketch a little bit, and put on a cute outfit, and but sometimes it's waking up and doing your taxes
mm-hmm.
and sending in your contracts for different not jobs, but different shows. It's a lot more admin than even I ever thought. And I was like, it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
It's intense.
You're like, it's that bad.
It is. It really is.
I think especially for folks who are on that creative end I feel like, so yes, and the service-based industries, I think you kind of go into a little more with like, okay, yes, there's probably going to be this, but I think especially when you're in industries where you're the creator, like you want to spend your time creating, and it can feel like a real
Hmm.
hang up to do all the admin stuff for sure. I can, yeah,
Yeah.
totally can relate. Is there,
And
okay,
my that is why my website is not as up to date as I would like it to be,
yeah.
because it's so much work to get it
It
there.
is. Yeah, websites. Everyone, right? Like I don't think I've ever met a person who's like, my website is just smashing and it is exactly where I want it right now today. It's always like,
Right.
it's in progress, don't judge me.
Yep.
Um, is there an important piece of advice that you've ever been given and you've applied to your business?
Ooh. I feel like there has to be. Um, Off the top of my head, I don't know if it's necessarily a piece of advice. I always kind of have like a quote or a song that really sticks with me.
Mm,
And one that's always stuck with me is just act like you've been there before. So, you know, this state fair, huge opportunity for me, but still showing up with respect to those around me, and those who didn't get a spot. It's not just having that compassion and acting like it is a big deal, but it's not, we don't need to throw it in everyone's
mm,
face.
sure, that's good. Is there anything you would tell your younger self, knowing what you know now? Would you do anything different? Your 5-year-old sewing days?
I would say that we did it. We did it. I growing up, I always thought I would go to school for apparel merchandising and design, or like fashion design. I shouldn't say I thought I would. I thought it was a pipe dream. Like, I didn't think it was possible. And I'm so lucky, I had parents who supported me. Girls I went to school with, their parents cut them off because that's what they were going to get their degree in.
Mm,
And my parents were like, go, good for you. Like, let us know how we can help you. So just looking back, I remember being in high school, someone being like, you can't go to school for fashion. You have no style.
oh,
And I'm
ouch.
and I was like, you don't really understand the concept, right? Like, because fashion school wasn't wearing a cute outfit every day. It was understanding textiles and the science behind them and how they work to create a fabric. But just like looking back at myself, just being like, you did it. Like, you made a business. You're doing this. Um, I just have to think I'd be pretty proud of that, even though there were a lot of struggles along the way, and it wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. It's weird being back pretty close to my hometown, where I grew up and still doing it. But I also think that's kind of the beauty of it. I didn't have to go to New York or these large fashion capitals to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, you were talking a little bit about songs, books, quotes that inspire you. Do you have right now a song, a book, or a podcast that you just can't stop talking about or just really inspires you?
So I, yes, I pull it from a lot of different areas. Um, a couple books that I always recommend is the number one book I recommend is American Icon. It's about Alan Mulally and his fight to save the Ford Motor Company. So basically, during the recession, how he reworked the system to get them out of it. And it's very dry and goes into a lot of financials, but it has a really good um, message on perception is everything. And I think that's really important to understand is the way people perceive you is more important than almost anything, unfortunately. So that's a book I would recommend. I really like, there's a bull rider who's done quite a few interviews recently. He's JB Mooney. There used to be a TikTok sound that said like he's a $7 million bull rider.
Cool.
Because he's one of the most famous ones out there. He is the most famous, but he kind of has this like very cut and dry attitude on life. If one of the things he says is, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly, because they're the most dangerous. Just kind of having that fearless attitude of just go and do it. And you can't do that every day in life, but when I'm going to a show and just having this attitude of, we're going to go in there and we're going to kill it. And just kind of that little turn, flip that switch that flips. It's important.
That's cool. When you're relaxing and you want to kick back, is there a favorite beverage of yours?
I really like the non-alcoholic White Claws.
All right.
I don't drink a lot, and I can't do caffeine after, like 1 o'clock, or I'm going to be up all night.
Yeah.
So I've found that that's a good compromise for me, is to do like a sparkling water, like the NA White Claws.
That's fun. I like it. What are you most excited about for the future?
I am excited to get my website running.
Yeah.
And this is my affirmation that it's going to get done. We just switched to a new host, and it seems like it's going to be really simple and a lot user-friendly for the consumers and for me on the back end.
That's awesome. Congrats. Can't wait to see it. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Last two here, okay? What's something people often get wrong about you, Maisey?
The business or me personally?
I think you could go either way with this, whatever you want.
I think in the business and probably in life too is that it's easy. I wake up and I just kind of float by, but they don't see the work behind it. Or because I'm there with a smile and I can chat with you and stuff doesn't mean that when you leave I'm not working. That's I think people don't always understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you my attention while I'm in front of you. Like right now, we're talking. I'm not working on something else, but when we get done, I'm going to go back to work and I'm going to do what needs to get done today.
Yeah. All right, last up. What do you think business owners can do to make the world a better place?
Understand that it's not a competition. So we're in the Walnut Center is where we met at the state fair. If someone came in there and said, what are 5 things in this building that I have to buy from that I need? I'm not just going to point them to my stuff. If I can get people in there to shop for me, that is great for me. But that's also great for you and for everyone else in the building. So if we all put a little bit in to get people there for us, and then let them know, like, specifically the Walnut Center, this is all Iowa artists. Everything in here is made by us. That's so huge. Like, support everyone.
Yeah, I love that. This is really good. Thank you for hopping
Yeah,
on and supporting us on the podcast. This is great. Like, I
absolutely.
think people can take so much from what we talked about today, whether, they are manufacturing, creating, fabricating as their business, or just curious. I think there's so much fun
Right.
about just being curious and picking and pulling pieces of wisdom from each other's stories that I love.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing some wisdom today. I think this is really fun.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if people want to find you, the best place would be possibly TikTok. You could really see some videos, some cool behind the scenes. TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yep.
Website is out there, but it's coming with some brand newness. So
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Where is TikTok the best? Like, what's the best if somebody wants to actually reach out to you? What's the best way to do that?
Honestly, whatever.
Perfect.
I mean, I try to keep track of everything. I'm not always the best, so if you reach out and you don't hear anything, reach out again. Like, I'm not intentionally ignoring you,
Yeah.
but yeah, just shoot me a message wherever you find it. Wherever you find me. I don't care. I just want you there. Like, just come hang out.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you for hanging out with me today. This was really great.
Yeah.